Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. You're tuned into the Secrets Great Light Part 1, a two-part series. This is actually going to be back-to-back today, starring Sigmon Taylor. It's so much fun to say Sigmon Taylor.
Is it?
It
Most
is.
people, like people who don't know us, email the studio and they'll say, "Dear Sigmund." And I'm like,
Oh no. See, I look at it as more of like Sigmund Taylor, like a financial establishment that's been around since 1871 and
exactly.
like strong, firm, like or maybe like
Like,
one of those furniture retailers that sells only the really good stuff. I don't know. We're going way off into the weeds. We came for lighting, and I'm like,
and we're off.
we're off. So, yeah, huge thank you to Sony for hosting whatever we're doing here. You guys are gonna get to the meat and potatoes of what's going on. But no, this is gonna be a great lighting series. You guys have lighting down. It's been, I think, a keystone of what you do with these elevated portraits. So I'm gonna let you guys handle it from here. I'm gonna run along. If you guys have any questions, joining us on YouTube, feel free to get them into the comments section. And if you don't know about our YouTube page, check it out. We have this and all of our other live pre-recorded content on there. So check that out. Monica, Michael, I'll see you in a bit for some Q&A.
Hello, everybody. I'm Monica.
I'm Michael.
And Derek's right. Lighting is such a huge piece of what we do. So we're really excited because today we're doing two parts. Right now, 1 o'clock, and then part 2 at 3 o'clock. And then, of course, they'll be in the library. But we're going to start the first part of the program with some lighting fundamentals. And Michael, why don't you just kind of introduce what we're doing real quick while I get that pulled up?
You know, we've both been, especially myself, I've been talking about lighting for years and years and years. And, you know, it's always been really actually a little bit of a struggle for me. How do you teach something that you do every day, but you go into these situations that are almost always different, you know, and how do you help people handle these situations? So kind of really changed things a lot on this program about lighting and really made it more conceptual as opposed to, okay, put this light here, put that light there, then you get this. Because, you know, we all have different tastes, we all have different styles. There's a huge amount of different products that we all photograph. So, you know, every situation is different. But I was really thinking that if we could kind of approach it as to how we approach things in general about lighting and how it's a reflection of us, that maybe people could see how that affects our images and what we come up with foundationally.
We want to teach people how to see light.
And feel it and be able to solve problems for themselves. Because, you know, we're not going to be standing next to you. We don't want you to stand. You don't want us to stand next to you while you're shooting, you know, and but maybe if we can stand next to you mentally a little bit in the back of your mind, this will help.
Okay, so I am going to start our keynote here, and we should be looking at just our logo. And Derek, Danny, can you guys just give me a thumbs up and let me know we're all looking at the right thing?
Thumbs up.
Okay, perfect. All right, so as Derek mentioned, we would not be here without Sony. So we thank Sony for having us get these opportunities to speak with B&H and kind of share what we're doing. We are diehard Sony fans. We were Sony fans long before we started doing anything
with Sony,
teaching wise. And we have found over the years that it's no exaggeration to say we wouldn't be able to create the work that we're making had it not been for switching to Sony several years ago. So we're very, very grateful.
Yeah, in particular, there's a couple of product lines that you've created for the studio that it's been huge that we shoot with Sony cameras because of the dynamic range. So
So we have a studio in Williamsburg, Virginia. We are portrait photographers, and we're lucky enough to have a retail studio here. And we're going to share a little bit today about the different kinds of portraits we do, and different techniques that you guys can be thinking about when you are working with clients and doing different things. So as Michael mentioned, today is very conceptual. We're going to talk about some foundational principles so that you guys can come up with your own style, not just copying us or somebody else, but really learning the principles so that you can then create the style that you want to have.
We want to show you some building blocks so that you can flourish with your style. You know, if you want to copy someone, that's obviously a way to learn when you're first starting out with any kind of craft or art or whatever. But to really, truly get images with some passion and depth and personality, you need to build something in your own style. You don't want to copy somebody else, because when you're copying someone else, that's all you're thinking about. You're just thinking about, hey, how can I make it look like Annie's work or Gregory's work or Mark's work or whoever it is?
Okay, so let's start with what you're going to talk about today.
Okay, so building a foundation. These are really the building blocks. You know, just like in a building, you put a foundation down. So we want you to learn how to find the light, be it available light or whatever it is, in the studio, on location, outdoors, in somebody's home, in a corporate office. We want you to be able to direct the light. We want you to be able to manipulate the light when you need to, or create light in a situation where there's no light or bad light. We want you to be able to handle that light. You need to learn what quality light is. You know, so much of this is really integrating it within yourself. So you need to look at people that you love, their images. You need to understand how to make people look great with lighting. You need to learn the rules to foundationally create different types of lighting setups. I mean, when you learn these rules, then you can break the rules.
That's my favorite.
Which is really important.
That's my favorite.
You know, so when you understand the foundations, you're able to move away from it. And most importantly, you need to be able to feel the light, because everything doesn't fall within a certain box. It shouldn't. You know, when you put everything in a certain box, it's always going to look the same, and it's going to look boring after a while.
So we're going to hit each of these topics between part one and part two. So let's start with finding the light. And I'm going to kind of pepper in some commentary here, because I think that one of the most common mistakes, I know you're going to talk about this, but one of the most common mistakes that photographers make when they're photographing outdoors is they see a beautiful backdrop, beautiful background, and then that's where they want to photograph.
So this is really important. So think about this. Most photographers, their paradigm, the reason they choose a spot to photograph in is because it looks great. The scene looks great. But does it make that person look great? Is the lighting on that person look wonderful? How does it fit together? And where our paradigm is, we want to look for places where the lighting's beautiful. And then secondly, look in the background and go, does this help tell a story? Does this fall into place with a dynamic range? Is it beautiful in the background? Is there texture in the background? There's just beautiful lighting in the background. But first, the paradigm is that spot great for lighting on this family, that person, that individual, or can we manipulate it to make it look great there? And then everything else falls into place.
And sometimes too, that requires that we feel really confident in our skill set and have that conversation with the client, because there's plenty of times we go on location and a client says, oh, can we shoot over here? I really want to get this in the background. I really want, that's so beautiful. I want to use the archway, or I want to use the gazebo or whatever. And then we have to have the confidence and the know-how to say, you know what, that is a gorgeous gazebo. However, it is going to be terrible lighting on your face. And it's more important to us that we get beautiful lighting on you and then find the background, because you're not hiring us to hang a portrait of a gazebo in your living room. We want you guys to look great. And they always understand. They always are. I've never had anybody fight us on that. Once we tell them that they're going to look terrible, or they're going to be squinting or have raccoon eyes or whatever, we happen to live near two rivers, and so clients are constantly like, can we want to be photographed on the river, and we want the river behind us and the sunset and whatever, and we have to always say, listen, the James River is blue 3 days a year. The likelihood of us hitting the James River on a gorgeous day are slim to none. The other 362 days, it's brown,
Mhm.
it's mucky, and it is not what you have envisioned. And so, so we have to be able to have those conversations and speak from experience and expertise.
Yeah, just having confidence. And you know what? Mostly when we talk to our folks, we do it with kindness, because they know we're caring about them. We're also listening to them because, some of the most creative portraits that I've done over the years, the mom came up with some suggestion. And I usually thought they were crazy, but then when I started thinking about it, it was like, great idea. So do it with kindness.
So we want to find places that the lighting is beautiful on their face, and then put them in that place that, find a place that the lighting is beautiful on their face and the background falls into place exposure wise. I mean, obviously today's camera can handle a greater range than they used to be able to, but we want that, like this image here, the exposure behind them isn't way, way brighter or way, way darker. And I think too, there has been a few years where all of the really light and airy photography has been very, very popular. And I think that being able to dial in exposure like this and be able to have the entire frame tell the story and contribute to the story is harder than it looks sometimes. We have to think a little bit more.
Yeah, and I love this because there's beautiful lighting on him. He looks great. It's a very natural position that he just fell into. I love the leading lines that bring your eye back to him. And then we have out of focus foreground, out of focus background, which creates a sense of depth and dimension. But we also have the colors in there that are helping with the composition. Green in the foreground, green in the background, and then he looks great with some green in his pants and all that, and his red hair that is complementary to the green colors. So there's a lot of little things that help make this work better.
And I think too, one thing that is helpful for me is I try and as I'm shooting, look at all four corners. That sounds so rudimentary and so obvious, but really thinking about, just including elements that will contribute and making sure, like you said, that things are rhythmically together and color. And but again, you chose this place first and foremost because the lighting on him would be great. There across from this is a beautiful building, wall, gate, everything that would be a gorgeous background, but the lighting was terrible. So again, we just have to sometimes explain to clients that the story is him and not the building.
Well, and I think that four corner thing that you mentioned was really important too, and we have 380 slides, so this will take 3 weeks to go through our program. But, it's when you really start hitting on all cylinders is you have that main subject that's important, obviously. But when you start paying attention to everything in the image so that it supports the visual interest, in this portrait, because we want this to be visually interesting and we want an emotional connection so that, someone that doesn't even know this young man wants to stop and take a look at it.
All right. So we have beat finding the light into the ground, I think.
So you want to be able to find the light, then you want to be able to direct the light through using of different lighting patterns and things like that. Now, every person I've ever heard talk about lighting has gone through all the different lighting patterns on a face. We don't need to do that today. John Gress, for example, here is a great teacher of lighting patterns and all. This little video, look it up on YouTube. John Gress, Mastering Lighting Patterns. He's a Elechrome ambassador also, like Monica and I, and he's great at this. So go search that out and find that out. And that's one of the foundational things of knowledge that you need to learn.
Yep. And it's spelled Gress. He is an excellent educator. All right.
So there's so many tools for us to choose from, and that's probably one of the reasons people get confused about lighting, or why they sometimes kind of follow one person and just do exactly what that one person does in every different situation.
Well,
Because it's so hard to decide what to do while you're trying to find a location, deal with people. The 3-year-old's running off, the dog is like on the next golf course, whatever it is.
and I think too that, and I've been guilty of this, we've all been guilty of it at some point, but we think the gear is going to solve the problem. So we think, oh, this is the magic light, this is the magic softbox, this is what I've been struggling with. All I have to do is buy this combination and this will solve the problem. And so I think the point of our program today is to talk about, if you understand the principles of lighting and what your goal is to achieve with lighting, then you can pick and choose different tools based on, the scene, the where you're shooting and what you want to accomplish. So it's not about any singular particular light or softbox. It's about how do we create the light that we're trying
Yeah,
to create.
and that's conceptually, when you learn the foundation, you realize that there's tools, like we love some tools that we're going to show you, and they really help us out and they make our life easier. But there's tools like the ground, a sidewalk, a van that's white, whatever it
Fence.
is, a fence, a building that's reflecting light and is creating a great light source. So just quickly, here's some gear that we love. On the next slide.
Oh, sorry. I'm like, that's really small. Are they going to be able to see that? Okay.
So we love the Kupo grip equipment, obviously Sony. We are in love with the Elinchrom strobes, the consistency. It's a great price point. There's a lot of value in this strobe because consistent exposure, consistent color. Temperature, which is huge. And the Elinchrom light modifiers are fantastic. One of the things Elinchrom has, which is so very important, is having a dome as a light source. We don't want a flat flash head. We don't want speed lights. We want a light that's a dome like the Elinchrom one here. And it's a beautiful light source that spreads the light out. You don't want to have a flat head to be your light source. It's a point light source, then you lose the quality of light then, and you lose the value of using these different light modifiers by using a flat head in your softbox.
And happy to say that all of these can be purchased at B&H.
Right.
So, so we get all of our gear there, and it's just very easy to do one-stop shopping there. So, so these are some of our modifiers that we enjoy.
They're easy to put together. These Photic Raja modifiers from the Mac Group is unbelievably easy to use. The Elinchrom umbrellas, quality, they last and last and last. You're not buying them over and over again every year. We use different sizes. The big Octabox that we use in
That's my favorite.
Right. You use this in the studio
Mhm.
for your black label. We use it for family portraits. We use the Elinchrom 5 on some of these larger groups when we need more of a light spread, we need more power. Everything we can adjust the lighting with our flash trigger. So this is how we are able to direct the light. You want to be able to find the light, you want to be able to direct the light, and you've got to use a light meter.
We are old school. We are old school. Most people do not use light meters anymore. And, but we are old school because we don't want to just dial the light until it looks right on the back of our camera. We want to know exactly what we're getting and to be able to control them exactly how we want to, very intentionally. So, in fact, we have a lighting workshop coming up next week, and everybody has to bring a light meter. So some of them will be unpacking it out of the box, but
and some will be buying it from B&H, but it's because we don't want to just hope.
Yeah.
And your screen on the back of your camera is going to adjust depending on the ambient light of where you're at. So it's going to adjust, and it's going to give you really kind of false hope. So we want something that's exact and measurable, so that's consistent. And we use it every day, be it this portrait of Thomas Jefferson here in Colonial Williamsburg. These are being able to direct the light with the light box. We did a family portrait down in Atlanta using not all this fancy equipment, but using the driveway, using a white car, and I added a little bit of reflector on
I'm
the
just
left-hand
trying
side.
to circle with the mouse over here. Hopefully you guys can see it, but that's where the portrait is being taken. And so you can see kind of what else is happening. And then this is how it turned out.
This is David Truss and his family. David's the executive director of Professional Photographers of America. But just from that simple location and using that driveway and using that surrounding area, we get beautiful lighting on the family. We have beautiful hair light and edge light on all the folks. Everything's falling in exposure-wise. It's a good natural place to put people. Bringing the Raja softbox with the Elechrome 1 out on location, so we have some directional light, a little second light bounced off a wall for a fill light. So
we are gonna, I feel like we are skipping ahead a little bit, but we are gonna come back and talk about what we're directing the light to do. Not just, so I don't want people to think, okay, that's great, you're putting up a softbox, but why are you, like, where is the softbox? Why are you trying to put the softbox? Why did you need the softbox? Where is it going? How are you accounting for it? What are you trying to achieve with it?
well, I generally want directional light on the people in general. When you use directional light coming from the side, usually at somewhere around a 45-degree angle or so, that gives you highlight and shadow. When you put light sources right close to the camera, or like with a speed light, for example, you are flattening out the face. So you're losing dimensionality, but you're also adding weight to the face. So we want to make people look great. We want to make people look their best in general. We're retail portrait photographers, and even with our commercial work, we're trying to make people look great.
So we're
So we
trying to
have-
shape light on the face. is
Right,
what
we
I'm
want some
trying to-
dimensionality there. We have a medium that's even with a screen that has width and height. So with lighting, highlight and shadow, we get some dimensionality to the face, but also we're placing things within objects within the scene to give that illusion of dimensionality also. The pillow on the left-hand side, the table on the right-hand side, things like that. The window behind her that we overexpose to keep that high key feeling within this portrait.
Yeah, sorry, software update wanting to install right now, but no, we're not going to do that. So another thing that I think is confusing for people is this notion of the quality of light, because oftentimes we teach and they'll say, well, I see the light on the face, but it's not a great quality of light. The energy isn't great. So can you explain that to people, that it's not just enough to have the light actually appearing on their face, but how are you defining quality of light?
Depending on the situation, in general, I want a flattering light that is skimming across the face and not creating a harshness usually on the face, so that people are flattered. In probably 99.9% of the time, I'm going to want light that's going into the eyes. The light that's reflected off the eyes is very important because it gives shows a lot of the personality of
We
that
want
subject.
that sparkle.
Or that highlight in the eyes. So many times people are going to bring a light source that's too high. And so we need to bring it at a certain point, said it's generally at 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock. That's usually the most flattering angle for people. And we want it to fit the personality of that person in that environment or that scene.
So what's a way of, because you and I have been around a while, so we can look at portraits and we can say the light was too high. We know that, but so for people out there that are still learning and they're reviewing their work and they're trying to figure out how to make it better, one of the telltale signs of a light being too high
is no light in the eyes. There's no highlight in the eyes. It's being hidden by the forehead or by the hair or whatever it is. So that's one way. Another thing too is a lot of times when we first get gear and equipment and get into this industry or whatever, we get enamored by the gear. And just because we're using, whoa, a softbox with lighting and all that kind of stuff, we think, that's it, we got it solved. But we still have to look. And so the issue is you have to build a library of images within you in your mind. You have to look at things, you have to find favorite photographers, you have to get mentors, you have to look at images, look at images, look at images, look at images, so that you can bring this library back in mind while you're photographing. It's those very few seconds that you're looking at the person and dealing with that person and interacting with those people that you're making these decisions. But is this making somebody look better? Is this making their nose look too big maybe? Or is this, oh, that's a bad shadow that way. So, you know.
Okay, so let's talk about these couple images.
So when we talk about quality of light, I think over 43 years, I sacrificed quality of light maybe twice on a total of 6 images. So maybe it wasn't award winning, maybe it wasn't supremely unique, but I never sacrificed it. I found a way to get a flattering light on the people, be it a group of photographers that we were touring. This was at a workshop in a restoration warehouse. It wasn't good lighting, but the place was interesting. So I bounced a strobe off the end of that bookcase or whatever it was, so that I could get directional light on her, and then put a little reflector underneath so that there brings some light up in the eyes. You did this beautiful portrait with door light actually, and softened it with a translucent screen, but it was dimensional light. It was interesting. You have highlight to shadow, highlight to shadow. She made it look visually interesting. So you got to have quality of light. You can't just throw light at people.
This one actually, if you go to my Instagram on Reels, I actually show how I did this exactly. And it was the translucent, but it was also flagging off that big source of light so that we just had a very narrow light source instead of the whole door illuminating the whole scene. I just wanted really kind of to come in on her. So so there's some reels on Instagram about that.
So, you know, there's a reason why we're talking more conceptually. If you guys are looking through this, the group picture of photographers, it was lighting bounced off a building towards the end of the day that was bouncing back into them. So this building was acting as a light source. Well, this next portrait, it was a bookcase with a strobe bounced off it that was acting as the main light source. On the third one, you know, it's available light that you were modifying acting as the light source. So, you know, there's all radically different. They all fit that mood and that environment, but it's having us, we just have to think about what we're doing and apply it to that scene.
And the goal is always the same across those portraits, is to make to light the face in a way that is flattering and have some energy about it and
suits that person, suits that person, suits that environment, suits that style of portraiture that you're doing. This lighting with her that you did suits what you're trying to do, you know? So if you put a speed light on there, it wouldn't. So we got to learn the rules, be it traditional family portraiture, going outdoors, be in the studio, going to the home. So you need to learn those basic rules. We want to be able, since we know those, then it gives us the freedom to break the rules. You know, this was kind of an odd portrait out in the middle of the woods, but at the end of the session, we stopped at this little dock, and there's no compositional book that says, this is how you pose a family. But this tells so much about this family and the individual personality of these people to make it work. So you're breaking the rules. This next portrait, beautiful portrait in the studio, there is no book that will say, this is how you pose this family, and let's bring fingers of that little boy up in front of his face. But every single person in this portrait has a real, unique reaction, and it's wonderful. and there's a rhythm to it because they're all looking at him, and it's like a caught moment, you know? So break the rules. This next portrait, you know, these three dancers would look lovely if you had cropped in on them. It'd been great, it'd been beautiful. But to me, this portrait is so much more interesting when you see a bit of the environment. So you got the beauty, and then you got kind of the hardware around it. So it makes it so much more interesting. You're breaking the rules. We don't see her face, but there's the beautiful warmth and loveliness of her and the softness. And it's where you can just step back and stop for a moment. So you have all this, but you also need to feel the light. You know, even though it's visual, you need to feel it. These beautiful portraits, series of portraits you did of the dancers, where there was some motion and there was just not a roughness, but a relaxing of the rules with lighting that you use.
But the lighting's still great on both of them,
Mhm.
even though it's more, it's less traditional. The lighting is still showing what we wanted to show, or what I wanted it to show.
Such a simple portrait, but for that year, this was almost my favorite portrait. So simple, moment that was just caught, beautiful backlining, and it was just the love that they have for each other was caught. So it's like feeling the light. This last portrait you did recently, you know, you broke the rules about profiles, you broke the rules about her left arm, but you know what? It's powerful and beautiful, and it's a great reflection of where she is in her life right now. So it's breaking the rules. You're just feeling the light. You're feeling her strength. You're feeling the beauty of the light on her. For us, and you've seen a bit of all the different types of portraits we can do, and we haven't even showed you the commercial work, but we want to make people look great. We want to light the people to match the subject and the environment. We want to get light into the eyes. These are our principles. We want to have feeling over the rules. It's more important that if there's this emotion, or if this moment, or if there's this scene that just got captured, and maybe there's not light in Dad's eyes on this one or something, it's more important to have the feeling. We want emotional connection. We want that rapport with the people. We want visual interest. And I always say, make a path, don't follow one. Be the trendsetter. So we got quite a few portraits here that just show you some of the work that we do every day. And this is a reflection of what we just talked about. Beautiful.
So I do want to just jump in and say these portraits, I think we've talked about, maybe we've used a strobe for a family portrait outdoors 3 or 4 times. So primarily we're looking at where the light is falling, how we can bounce light back into the subject matter. In this case, it was bouncing off of the gravel.
Right.
And we also had a reflector, but we're not using strobe really unless somebody has intentionally, like they need a specific location at a specific time of day that isn't ideal for
Right.
lighting.
We generally have the freedom to pick the spot
Mhm.
because of the lighting.
Mhm.
And people, because of our reputation, that which takes time to build, and our confidence, people trust us.
Mhm.
So we don't want to carry a bunch of gear around so that we can interact with the people, enjoy the people, and be creative.
And this, there's no reflector on this, I don't think, right? Because, well, for her, maybe I used a
A little
reflector for
bit,
her.
yeah.
But on him, the light is reflecting off of the fence behind her.
Mhm.
So again, just looking for where is the light, what's it bouncing off of, and then of course the background behind them falls into place.
This is an incredible place. It's called Laycock Abbey. It's the home of Henry Fox Talbot, who's one of the founders of photography. This is actually where the first 2 Harry Potter movies were filmed, and we're able to do a family portrait over there a few years ago. So just using available light again and a reflector, and just use.
And that was a cloudy, rainy day.
Yeah.
So, we had lights with us, we had reflector. This was in England, so we didn't bring a ton of stuff with us, but we were able to know where to put them, where to get the light across all three of them. And I think it worked really well.
And be able to have fun
Mhm.
also. We got the traditional stuff, and then we were able, because of the time we had, be able to be a little more creative. And be able, and look at this, it's just incredible, like from the portrait before and to this one, that Sony camera can capture that dynamic range.
Mhm.
You know, it's
Mhm.
just
And that was
mind
what,
blowing.
3 versions ago?
Yeah,
The
it's not even
A7R
what
II
we
or
have
3,
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and then in the studio.
I'm drinking.
Oh,
Go ahead.
so what are you trying to show with these studio portraits?
Well, again, we're just using the light to create personality. There obviously has dimensionality. There's visual interest. There's color harmony in this. There's this beautiful feeling and connection. All this precision with lighting, the cameras, the metering, and all that makes no difference if you don't have the feeling, emotional connection, and the touch with the people.
Okay, so we've got some commercial images here to talk about. So how is all of this translating to commercial work?
So even with commercial work, we want to flatter people. We want to tell stories about people, especially with the commercial work. We use lighting for that. These are a couple of neurosurgeons who I was actually set up in an operating room that was sterile, and they decided they want their portraits done during the middle of an operation. So let's add a little difficulty, but just showing you the lighting a little bit. This is head of surgery for Riverside Hospitals, using the lamps up there, adding some speed lights in the background for background lighting, using the Alchrome 100 there.
That's
and
really lighting his face.
lighting his face.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Speed lights to the right, speed light to the left behind the cart. So just available light, capturing the feeling, that emotion. It's terrible lighting on the face. There's no light in the eyes, but you know what? It was a great moment. There was feeling there. That is just like I could get it. There's just feeling there. So, a lot of these, we're trying to not make things look sterile. We want to have fun with the portraits, want to capture life. We still using good lighting on the resident and the nurses. Having these are sports medicine doctors, instead of getting them in their lab coats, in front of a white background, take them out to the gym, have the women's basketball team running. So you drag the shutter for the ladies in the background, key light, fill light on them, a little speed light, 2 speed lights in the background to create dimensionality and highlights, and boom. Key light, fill light, third light, you can see it bouncing off the ceiling off the left-hand side to get visual balance. If there wasn't a light over there on the left-hand side, it would go dark. So a lot of times you're talking about using your lighting for visual balance.
So you call it a key light. Many people, just in case there's any questions out there, many people call it a main light. And the other thing that we do that is different is that we put the main light, key light, and the fill light on the same side of the camera, on the same side of the subject. And so we want that fill to just enhance what the key light is doing and extend that direction of light. We don't want the fill on the opposite side, because then we can get into some cross lighting issues. We can get into undoing the whole purpose of what we're trying to do by shaping the face, because now we're adding light from both sides.
Yeah, I see these lighting diagrams and people are doing that. Then I look at the final image and they're canceling each other out.
Right,
And it drives me batty. And because I think they're trying to use that main light for dimensionality and all that, but then they're taking the fill light over here and canceling what that main light is doing. Also, if you put that fill light up high, it's wrong. It is just wrong.
Why?
Because a fill light generally is to give a non-directional light source in general. You start bringing it up high, you're causing dimensionality. The light, there'll be shadows under the nose, shadows slightly under the chin. If your fill light isn't somewhat non-dimensional, directional, I'm so sorry, it's going to create shadows. So even if it's, I will bring the height of that fill light to the height of the people. You know, if it's a family group, I'm going to average it out. If it's a 3-year-old, I'm going to bring it to the height of that young gentleman or whatever it is.
And in part 2, we're going to show a little bit more about building that
Building that wall of
yeah.
light and handling that. We don't need to
Okay, skipping ahead. There we go. All right, and then you did a series for a sports medicine center and more storytelling images instead of just photographing the doctors, telling more about the result of what the doctors
but
did.
more importantly, because this is a lighting program, you know, all these were done with just available light. And if there was any reflector used, it was a large reflector that was put on the ground.
So here the
Okay.
light's actually behind them.
It's behind them with a light streaming through, so it's really more of an edge light, rim light, right? So a reflector was on the ground, propped up a little bit for my equipment case, so that it was bouncing back in the faces just a little bit.
I always think these interactive portraits lit from behind are so emotional, you know, and many people don't know how to describe them, and so they'll call them candid, but it has that feeling, but that every decision is intentional.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for example, so we have the fence, right? So you have the fence from the bottom left-hand side, and it brings your eye to the family. And then you have the leaves, the trees, the beautiful color back there, that gives you visual texture back behind the people, you know, so it's just being able to manipulate the available light that's out there to tell that story. This was a deep sea diver, strobe outdoors, because I wanted to use that space, that location for that time of day, and that key light is providing the directional light for me. A little fill light, a speed light behind him to create some dimensionality and to get some highlight in between his legs on the diving helmets. And it just happened that this flock of birds just flew through there. So bam, just like that. Key light, reflector, little speed light behind him. The blue in the pictures on either side of him is giving color harmony.
And this is a good example of why our fill light is on the same side as the key light. So his his right side, camera left, is more shadowed than the other side. We want that because we want his face to have shape. If we had that fill on the opposite side or closer to the camera, then it just flattens out his face. And most people don't look flattered like that. I think we're under this, in the age of COVID and social media and ring lights, we're under this misconception that ring lighting is very flattering for everybody, and it's not. So that's why we are always trying to create shape from faces.
So again, we had a big octabox, probably like a 45-inch, 46-inch octabox, and this young lady, one of the partners in this accounting firm, they were using all the images actually square. So all these images that you see in this row with Blue Edge Capital was going to go on the website square. Speed light in the background there to light up the name of the group. But again, we still have hair light on her. We have good lighting on her. Then putting her, because of her clothing, in a spot where there was a little bit of contrast in the signage so that it would fit.
So I think this is where we're stopping for part 2. Is that right?
Okay, sure.
Or did because next is the wall of light and how we create a wall of light everywhere we go.
Yeah, we
So
only have 300 more slides.
So that's
So yeah.
part 2. So Derek, anybody, if there's any questions, it's like anyone, Bueller. They're not used to us wrapping up early.
I am so impressed that Derek is still with us. Man.
What happened? You guys left
I know.
14 minutes on the table.
Well, I mean, the thing is that
we have part 3, 4, 5, and 6 all lined up.
We can do the next little bit, but I feel like really is part of the next big bit. Do you know what I mean? So do you want us to start the next little bit?
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
like I think it's easier to
I'm
digest
ragging.
if we're, yeah.
No, you guys are, come on, you guys are experts. This is from the minds that developed the rubric. So how would I dare step on your toes?
That
Of
that was
course not.
her. That was her.
So now I gotta ask then, who's the lighting mind? Who's the genius behind the lighting schemes?
He is, I mean, you've been known for decades for your lighting. I mean, teaching, and I studied with him at the beginning of my career. And so, learning the foundational principles from you. And then, like I said, my favorite part is breaking the rules. So with Black Label, it's one big light source and usually a black V flat over here. So I wanted that exaggerated, dramatic shadow on this side. And whenever I teach that, our students freak out because they're like, it's so dark, it's so dark. Don't we need more light over there? Don't we need more light over there? And so this notion of what are the rules and what can we break, but do we know why we're breaking the rule? What was the intention behind it? And so that's helped me with that. And then the gilded line, that window light line, I've done, but again, that's from just learning what the objective is, which is to shape that face. As a portraitist, that's our job. Now, sometimes we might want split lighting, or we might want a profile or whatever, but as portraitists, it's our decision making that is important with lighting in the face.
Yeah, and I was really fortunate. The studio that I started in, we were known for location portraits. I was in the Memphis studio. We had a studio in Little Rock and one in Shreveport. And the owner of the studios was so cheap that for the first year and a half I worked with him, I had one camera, one lens, and one strobe that worked. So, and no light meter in the days of film. So, and we're doing high-end portraits. You understand? I mean, you would not believe the celebrities and the stars I photographed and some families that are still well known to this day, And, what was nice was I didn't have a bunch of gear. I had to make what I had work. I mean, I was taking Reynolds wrap out to use as reflectors. So
Ask him about the time that his partner told him he could diffuse the bare bulb with a paper towel.
yeah, he said, I asked, I go, how do you change the power on this? And he says, well, just take some tape and some paper towels and just wrap that head, And so I did it on the next session, and I was actually outside because I was photographing through the doorway, and I look over and my flash head was on fire. And so I'm taking it off, and I'm running to the kitchen with the paper towels and flame to the kitchen sink. And yeah. But
he's like the MacGyver of, for those old enough to get the reference, he's kind of the MacGyver of lighting. And I still think the problem with Michael's work is that it looks easy, it looks simple. And so when you look at the work, you go, okay, I can do that. But then you go to do that, and it's much more complex than I think people anticipate. So I think that's why you chose a different tack with this lighting program, and I'm glad, which was foundational first, so that in part 2, when we get into the mechanics of it a little bit more, then people are understanding what the goal is. Because you said it at the beginning, everybody teaches lighting different. Everybody has different styles. Our way isn't right or wrong. It's just the way that our portraits look the way they do. If you like the way our portraits look, this is the way to do it. But there's many, many, many excellent photographers out there doing all kinds of different things with lighting. So it just depends on what style.
Yeah,
people want.
in part 2, we're just going to talk about some of the tools that we use that we're able to apply to different portraits, and we're proud that we can do beautiful studio portraits. We can go in location, we can do commercial work, we can go outdoors and kill it. But we're not equipment heavy, because we enjoy the people, and we don't want to do the same thing.
I mean,
all
people
the time.
are shocked, like other
Yeah.
photographers are shocked when we go on location and we're literally bringing, you know, the Sony with the 70 to 200 and a reflector. And that's it. Like we're not carrying extra, we're not bringing lights except for like we talked about on the rare occasion where we've had somebody that just had to be in a certain place at a certain time. So but it's funny because we photograph in some locations that now other photographers have discovered and they're starting to photograph, and so occasionally we'll be out there at the same time and we'll see another photographer and they're literally pulling like red wagons full of like strobes and umbrellas and battery pack, and we're just like, dude, and they're going like to these, and we're like, it's right here, like, do you want help? Like, it's right here, you don't need all of that. So but it's just style, it's just a different style, that's all.
Well, you know, you just want, unfortunately, people don't want to think.
Well, I don't
You
think
know,
it's that they don't want to think, I think it's that they don't know how to
well,
think.
maybe so.
Sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Don't know, right,
And
exactly.
That's why we rely on experience. And like you said, Monica, it's like you have to have some kind of foundational knowledge in order to know where you can deviate. And another thing, you guys are super intentional. You know, you're talking about the kind of light has to match the kind of look that we're going for. And I
Right.
think that's where people get lost, where it's like it's easy to tell somebody just take a single light with a modifier and you could do a bunch of different things with it. And it's like, well, yeah, you can, but what are you trying to do? Is that sufficient for what look you're trying to go for?
Right. And I love high fashion images. I love that look of the strobe overpowering everything else outdoors, right? Like I love that look. I think it's really, really cool. And but that's not what, as portrait photographers making a living, because we are working portrait photographers. This is our only income. So as portrait photographers making a living doing this, most families, that's not the look that is appealing to them. And it's not they're not, most families aren't wearing like designer gowns like Annie Leibowitz's shoots outdoors where we've got that, you know, we've got that intentional, powerful light. And so for us and these purposes, we don't want any of our portraits to look lit. We want them to look natural and amazing, but we don't want for somebody to go, oh wow, they brought a flash, or they brought, you know, even other photographers. Like and we'll show on part 2, we have the images that we've used with strobe outdoors, and nobody so far has been able to guess that we used a strobe on those. So we like that. That's what we like.
Yeah, if I can slide a question real quick. Patty Looney Productions joining us, asking about the use of a reflector. About the you know, using a reflector but not a fill light. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then for the outdoor family portrait that was backlit and had the reflector on the ground, why didn't using the reflector in such a way cause uplighting?
So let's start with the first one. Using a reflector opposite of the main light, but not a fill light. So I think what she's saying is, why can we use a reflector opposite of the main, but not put a fill opposite of the main? But we're not using a reflector opposite of the main. We're still using a reflector on the same side as the main light, unless they're being backlit, right?
yeah,
And it's
well,
not
like on studio portraits, for example, I think we will use a reflector if it's an individual, 2 people, things like that. When we have more people in that family group, we really trying to make our main light, our key light larger, and that's what we're actually doing with that fill light. We're actually kind of connecting it with that key light and making it a big broad source, so that when we have 5 people, 6 people, 10, 12, 20 people, that it's a light that has some personality, but it's reaching across that whole group. And just then using a reflector is awkward, because then you need a huge reflector or something like that. So, it kind of depends on the size of the group. A little bit depends on the size of on the type of personality of lighting that you want. Sometimes when we do a little bit more of a Vanity Fair type of light, more magazine type of lighting on a family group, we'll use that big light source, and then we'll use a really large reflector to bounce up from it.
But just to make sure, I want to make sure we're answering her question. We're not putting that reflector on the opposite side of the mains such that it's so powerful that it's evening out. That we're still trying to accomplish the same thing that we're doing with the fill light. So reflectors typically aren't as strong. And particularly I always use them on the white side. I never use gold. Occasionally we'll use silver, but I prefer to use white if possible. So by definition, it's not as strong. And so, and that was something I learned from you 20 years ago, because we'd go on a shoot together and the light would, or the sun would be coming here and I'd be over there with a reflector and you'd be like, come over to this side. And I'm like, but I need to be over here. And you're like, come over to this side. So that is something that's counterintuitive also. And so then
Plus being, you need to be subtle.
Right.
A little bit. You know, it sounds silly, but you tend to see the effect of the reflector, but then you need to back off.
And with that,
You know,
interactive
reflector.
portrait with the lighting behind, that the reflector is serving to give us exposure on the faces. It's not to shape the face in relationship to the main light, because the main light is just a backlight at that point. So we are using the reflector in that instance as exposure for their face. And you didn't lay it flat on the ground, because she's right, that might cause uplighting, but you had it propped up against your camera bag.
Camera bag or small light stand or something like that, just to get a little bit of a angle. You know, it's so much of this, and it would probably be a good program sometime, is about angles, you know, lighting and angles. It is so important, and you're always working the angles on these things, you know, be it with a softbox, Octabank, whatever, or just bouncing the light off a wall. You know, you just need to realize that, okay, when I angle the strobe this way, the light is bouncing at an equal angle onto the people, or onto the subject, or onto the scene. So you're always looking at angles about how a reflector's working, how that key light's working. You know, it's always about the angles.
Definitely. You got me. I'm like trying to do a little bounce over here. I don't think my
Oh, you just look.
LEDs.
Oh, right there. Yeah, you look great.
There
Yeah,
we go. There we
right in
go.
the
We
eyes.
got a little.
Very
Look
nice.
at that sparkle.
There you
Very
go.
nice.
In fact, we have portraits where, I don't think they're in the keynote, but where a child is at a table reading a book, and it's the book that's, you know, lighting, given that light in the eyes. So light reflects off of a lot of things besides just a reflector.
We always think you need to buy something to reflect light off of, you know, and we have sidewalks, we have dirt, we have
Fences,
a van,
Great point.
walls.
You just have to know what you want, what effect you're going to get from it, how to use it.
We had I was in Florida doing a big family, and it was the only day they were all together. It was raining. And so we put everybody under the arches on the front of the house. There was, you know, no directional light. It was so challenging. And I was helping another photographer, and she didn't have quite all the gear that would have helped us, but we did use a bare bulb strobe, but we needed more energy. So we laid down a bunch of white sheets on the ground in front of the steps. And then we had, like, all of their vehicles were white. It was weird. Like, there was a white Suburban, a white Tahoe, a white this. And so we just kind of drove them all into the driveway so that we could give a little bit more fill light there. So it's just, what is the light bouncing off of? And sometimes you just have to take a minute and look at the shadows on the ground, if there are any. We always walk around like this with our hand to see which way the light is falling. Is there hair light or edge light behind us? People think we're crazy when we walk around like that, but it's a lot easier to do that than it is to move a group of 6 people. Wait, go back, wait, go to the left, wait, you know, so we do that quite a lot too.
And we'll sneak one last question in from Ken joining us on YouTube. Since you seem to favor natural light and reflectors, are you adjusting ISO up to compensate?
We really haven't had to. Typically speaking, we haven't had to, because we do 1 session a day. So we use that beautiful end of the day lighting. We're looking for spaces with open sky. We're not photographing in the middle of a forest or something like that. So we've got a lot of nice open sky and ambient light kind of bouncing around. So So we haven't had to. Now, that being said, the black and whites in the studio that we showed of mine with that just little sliver of light, that was a miserable thunderstormy day and I wanted to shoot wide open. I was like at, 1.4 on that 50mm G Master lens. And so I cranked the ISO way up, but man, you can't tell. Like I still had to add grain in Lightroom just to get the effect that I wanted because there's no grain on those Sony files. So, so even if you do have to ratchet it up a little bit, it won't affect your prints.
Nice. Okay, so we're going to wrap it here for our live viewers. We have part 2 coming in just under an hour. I feel like this is like a school show. Like we're going to take a brief intermission.
Exactly.
We're going to have Sigmon Taylor back. Yes.
Go get a snack.
Go get a snack, bathroom break. When you come back, Michael's going to show us how to make an 8-foot octobank out of napkins. And I'm never going to forget that story. You guys have an hour. I need another story like that for part 2.
All right.
So dig in the bank. There we go.
I'm thank you. I don't have scars on my palms for that.
Michael's peeling. He's peeling modifiers off that everything's melted on. I love it. Oh, the good old days. Well, Monica, Michael, huge thank you to you, of course. Huge thank you to Sony for hosting this series, to all of our viewers out there. We do this all for you guys. Free education. That's what we do best here at the Event Space. We will see you in just under an hour. Another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space now in the books. Catch y'all in a few.
57 minutes.